Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Stencil Saturday video. This week, as you can see, I have marked my Woven Squares stencil. And so I've been thinking about wanting to, I want to do kind of block designs and border designs as well as things that could be backgrounds. And this is kind of one that I would envision you could easily use it for a border. And so because these are 3-inch squares, that means that this marked the way I have it here is 9 inches. So let's, as an example, we'll pretend that this is a 9-inch border. Okay, let's say maybe you had a 10-inch border. You could very easily add kind of like a bar across the bottom and the top to kind of make up the difference if it didn't quite fit. Or if you had a 12-inch border, you would just mark one more row. And we're going to stitch I don't even know how to explain. So we're going to use some of the lines, but then some of the other parts we're going to use just kind of the intersections as points. So what I want to do is, instead of stitching, let's say this one square, where I would stitch out all of these lines and then maybe add something into each little bar, we're going to treat 3 as 1. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and stitch in this one long line here from top all the way to bottom, and then this one, just to not get confused. There are a lot of lines there. And if I decided to start and stitch this through without kind of putting in these main guidelines, I very possibly would get confused and lose track of what I was doing. So I almost always get some kind of framework stitched in first just to keep myself on track. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch these lines all the way down to the bottom. And if this were a border, I would do this, kind of work my way the whole way across the border so that I had my framework there for the entire border before I started the design. Okay, so now that I have those main dividing lines in here, I'm just going to start and work this section, and just kind of work my way across. Each one done the same way. I'm just going to scoot right over here because this is where I want to start. Get rid of this thread so I don't have to worry about it later. Okay, so what I'm going to do is so if you look at this square, you have these 4 sections. We're going to treat this entire long rectangle as one. So we're going to stitch in this section. Then we're going to stitch using the lines that are here because we can line our ruler up. And we're going to stitch this one line all the way down through 3. So it's going to be like we take this one square and elongate it. Okay? So I'm going to go down all the way over here and then back so I get to that center line. And then I'm going to travel lining up, and I can use the lines, and I'm just going to go all the way to the bottom. Now that I'm almost to the very bottom, again, I'm going to go out and back, and then I'm going to do this bottom one all the way over and then back, and then all the way to the top, and then go up just until I hit this first little bar. Whoop. Okay, now I'm going to backtrack just a little bit up here, about it's halfway, so I can use my these are 1 inch each of these, so I'm going to use the first line on my ruler because I want to stitch a 1/2 inch line through each of these little sections, and it's going to allow me to travel through nicely because I already have the main lines there. this 1/2 inch line will go the whole way through. We're just kind of bypassing those other lines because we don't need those. Travel, and then I want to put this 1/2 inch line in the bottom bar as well. And you could put more lines in there if you wanted. I'm thinking that as a border, I'm probably not going to want it to be too terribly tight. And then I want to stitch this 1/2 inch line in this side, this long, narrow bar. And I am going to be doing some backtracking, and I'm using contrasting thread. I mean, ideally in a situation of an actual quilt, I would probably use a more matching thread. Now, we have these little 1-inch lines that flow the whole way through. You could travel and go out and back, or kind of zigzag your way, because I want to make these little squares in the center. But I also want to be able to start this next one up here. So I am actually going to zigzag. So I'm going to stitch diagonally from point to point to point. I'm going to do that the whole way, and then come back the opposite direction to make like little X's in there. So I'm just going to go point to point. Way to the bottom, and I'll just travel here and then do the same thing going back up to the top. So I'll be able to scoot right into that next one. It's always a really good idea to kind of either doodle before you start, or just kind of trace with your finger maybe the path that you want to take. And a lot of times I kind of decide on what I'm going to quilt by what will make it easiest to execute, to be able to move to the next one, or wherever you need to travel. So I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to do this same thing again. I'm going to go, I started on the, no I didn't. I'm going to go to here. Go over, backtrack out. And the really easy way to, if you're going to do this kind of thing where you go over and then backtrack out, is just be sure to try not to move your ruler at all, because then ideally you will backtrack right on the same line. Travel all the way to the bottom again. We're going to go all the way to the bottom, backtrack up. Complete this little bottom bar, so we're going to go all the way out, backtrack, and then up to the top. I'm going to scoot past that to do these 1/2 inch lines inside. Travel down, and then the 1/2 inch line in this long bar. And this is really, to me, a simplified version. You could very easily, if you want something a little bit more complex, a little more densely quilted, you very easily could be adding either more lines to these little bars, or maybe even an actual design to the bars. Maybe you want to come in to these little X's and maybe fill this part, or maybe you fill the outside ones to make these ones pop forward. There's just so many options, but that's really, personal preference. I'm going to stitch this line through there. Then we're just going to backtrack, make our way back to the center area here, and do these diagonals, just moving point to point. They're already there for us. Backtrack over to the opposite corner and do the same thing in reverse. And we're just going to sneak back out of the entire row here. Make our way over to this one. And we're just going to work this one the same way. So we're going to come down, out, and back, all the way to the bottom. Out and back, all the way to the side, back to center, and then all the way to the top. And I think something like this, once you get kind of the flow for the you know, execution of it, how you're going to stitch it, it really becomes fairly fast, I think. Now we're just going to work our way back through and add these little 1/2 inch dividing lines. Over one more. Back down to the center and kind of zigzag down to the bottom. Now back to the top to finish. And I'm going to go ahead and tie off here, but if this were an actual border, of course, you would travel out and just continue on in the row. So let me get rid of some of these lines. Okay, so I brushed off the most of the lines, and so now we can kind of see. I think this is really nice. I mean, it goes, you saw that after stitching the first one, maybe the second one, you kind of get the feel for the flow. And looking at this now that it's done, you might see where you could change it up a little bit. You know, maybe you decided that you wanted to go in here and maybe because each row is divided in half now, you might decide that you want to go in and add little feathers to this or something. Because we now have this center line, you could add little feathers here and make these little feather plumes that traveled around woven. Or maybe you pick the outer one or the inner one, just one, and maybe you want to add little circles like pebbles in each one. you know, there's so much room for you to reproduce this, either just plain or to take it and make it something that's more your own style. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. Bye.